I will never forget the sound of the car door slamming shut. That sharp, dry clack that felt like a gunshot, marking the end of something that had been dying quietly for years. Archero looked at me one last time through the windshield with that expression of irritation that had long become his default and said, "Get out, Claudia. If you're going to keep crying, do it out here." And then he drove off. The roar of the engine dissolved into the traffic, leaving me alone at that bus stop under a drizzle that seemed to mock me. I stood there without money, without a phone, without direction, while strangers walked past without even glancing at me, as if my misery were just another detail of the street. My makeup was smeared, my blouse soaked, my eyes swollen. I must have looked pathetic, a 68-year-old woman crying in public because the man with whom she had shared half her life had abandoned her like a stranger. For years I had endured his shouting, his cruel silences, his way of making me feel invisible, and yet even in that moment a part of me still expected him to turn back, to regret it, to return for me, but he never did, not then and not ever. The sky darkened quickly. I tried to shield myself beneath the rusted metal roof of the bus shelter, watching puddles form at my feet. I considered walking, but I had no strength. The cold seeped into my bones, and my heart pounded as if trying to escape my chest. Then I heard a voice, soft and melodic, almost like a lullaby. "It is all right, child," it said, and I turned my head. A blind, elderly woman stood leaning on her cane, wearing a beige coat and a wool hat that looked like it belonged to another era. Her white hair was perfectly pinned, her lips painted a gentle shade of red that contrasted beautifully with her pale skin. She held a small bag, and beside her stood a tall man in a dark suit who looked like her chauffeur. I stammered, unable to meet her unseeing gaze, saying I was fine. "No, you are not," she replied with a serene smile. "I have lived long enough to recognize the sound of abandonment." Her words struck me with a tenderness I was not prepared to receive. The chauffeur looked at her with deep respect and said, "Senora Emilia, we should go. The rain is getting heavier," but she lifted a hand to silence him. "Just a moment, Gustavo," she said calmly, then turned to me. "Child, I need you to do me a favor. Pretend you are my granddaughter. My driver will be here with the car any second. I will not allow that man who left you here to make the last cruel gesture tonight." "What?" I asked, confused. "I do not understand." She smiled again with that unsettling calm. "You do not need to understand. Just pretend for a few minutes and I promise you something. He will regret abandoning you." I do not know why I believed her. Maybe it was her tone, the authority hidden inside her empty gaze, or the confident tap of her cane against the wet pavement, as if the world moved aside for her. A black car pulled up in front of us. The chauffeur opened the back door. "Senora Emilia, the car is ready." She took my arm gently, her skin warm, her grip surprisingly firm. "Come, granddaughter," she said softly. "You will not remain here waiting for someone who does not deserve you." I climbed into the car without understanding anything. The seat smelled of new leather and expensive perfume. Through the window I saw Archero approaching his parked car, his expression annoyed and impatient, but when he saw me stepping into the elegant woman's vehicle, his face changed. For the first time in years he looked lost. The old woman turned her head slightly toward him, and without needing to see him murmured, "Life has very curious ways of settling debts, my dear." The car pulled away, the wipers sweeping a slow and steady rhythm. I kept silent, not sure whether to thank her or to ask who she was, simply watching her, trying to understand how a blind stranger could radiate such strength. After a few minutes, she spoke again. "Do not worry about your bag or your money. Tonight you will sleep under a roof, and tomorrow we will see if you are ready to begin again." "Why are you helping me?" I whispered. "Because once someone did the same for me," she answered, "and because when a woman has suffered too much, she recognizes the echo of pain in another." The car turned down a road leading into a residential district, where the lights grew sparser and the streets wider, until a wrought iron gate opened slowly before us. Behind it stood an old mansion rising through the rain, surrounded by ancient trees and a garden suspended in time. "Welcome home, Claudia," the old woman said without my ever telling her my name. My heart froze. "How do you know my name?" I asked almost in a whisper. She smiled, soft and unsettling, because destiny does not make mistakes when it brings two women together on the same path. The car stopped before a massive wooden door. Gustavo stepped out and opened an umbrella. Rain battered the ground. As I stepped out of the car, I felt as if I crossed an invisible threshold. The door opened slowly, and a warm breath of jasmine-scented air wrapped around me. I did not know then, but that night I was not merely entering the home of a stranger, I was stepping into the story that would change my life forever. I do not know how long I remained silent after leaving that car. The air smelled of wet earth and jasmine. The mansion before me looked like it belonged to another era. Tall windows draped with lace curtains, iron lanterns still flickering beneath the rain. And yet what unsettled me most was not the size of the place but its stillness. A dense, watchful calm that seemed to study me. Gustavo, the chauffeur, offered me the umbrella and said this way, "Madam," in a voice both kind and firm. The old woman moved slowly ahead with her cane, never hesitating, as if she knew every stone of that mansion by memory. I followed her drenched and confused, wondering why I was there, what this blind woman wanted, and how she had stepped so confidently into the darkest night of my life. As soon as we crossed the threshold, a gentle warmth enveloped me. The interior felt like a living museum, ancient portraits, frozen clocks, a crystal chandelier dripping with tiny glass tears. A distant melody floated through the air, faint as if a gramophone were playing in some forgotten room. "Sit down, dear," she said, pointing to a velvet armchair in deep blue. "Gustavo, light the fire." He vanished without a word. I obeyed, sinking into the soft, warm cushion, my hands trembling over my knees. She settled across from me and with a kind of theatrical calm said, "Now you may tell me what happened." I did not know where to begin. "It was a fight," I murmured, "not the first but the last." "And he left you there?" she asked with no surprise at all. "Yes, at the bus stop, without money," I said, nodding. She tilted her head as if confirming something she already knew. "I imagined as much," she said. "He had that look in the way he saw you." "You saw him?" I asked, briefly forgetting her blindness. She smiled, and the smile unsettled me. "I do not need eyes to see, Claudia." My name again sent a chill down my spine. "I do not understand how you know who I am," I whispered, and she answered that destiny had warned her of my arrival, and she always listened when destiny spoke, pouring tea with an impossible precision for someone who could not see. Gustavo returned with a tray of porcelain cups and heart-shaped cookies. The fire crackled in the chimney, a hypnotic sound. "I cannot stay long," I said, desperate to regain some control. "You only need to rest," she interrupted, "and remember who you are, because you have forgotten, have you not?" I turned to the fire instead of answering. For years I had forgotten so much, what I liked, what I dreamed, who I had been before shrinking into the shadow of Archero. This woman knew it, or worse, she had lived it herself. After tea, Gustavo showed me the guest room. The curtains were white linen, and on the nightstand sat an antique clock fixed at 10:10, its ticking filling the silence like a heart refusing to stop. Before falling asleep, I heard slow footsteps in the hall. It was Doña Emilia. Her silhouette paused outside my door. She did not enter, only said, "Do not fear the darkness, Claudia. Sometimes it is the only place where we find ourselves again." I woke at dawn after sleeping deeply for the first time in years. The sheets smelled of lavender. Through the window, the garden looked like a painting: tall trees, blooming roses, and a fountain where sparrows bathed without fear. Downstairs, she was already seated in the dining room, dressed in soft pearl gray with an antique pearl necklace resting on her collarbone. Beside her was a folded newspaper tied with a red ribbon. "You look better," she said without turning toward me. "The tea has done its work." "Thank you, but I must go," I said. "I do not want to trouble you." She smiled in that serene way of hers. "And where would you go, Claudia?" I hesitated. "I do not know." "Then you cannot leave yet," she said. "No one can flee without direction." Gustavo entered, set down breakfast, and left in silence. Doña Emilia lifted her cup with elegance and asked, "How long have you been married?" 41 years, I answered. "And of those 41, how many were you truly happy?" I took a long moment to answer. "Perhaps the first 10. "Then you have already spent more than half your life pretending to be happy," she concluded. "That, dear, is more deadly than loneliness." I said nothing. Her words hurt, yet I could not deny them. After breakfast, she invited me for a walk in the garden. Sunlight filtered through the branches, and the flowers gave off a sweet, intoxicating scent. Though she could not see, she walked with absolute confidence, as if the trees whispered directions to her. "You know," I said, unable to hold back, "you do not seem to need anyone." She laughed softly. "Of course I do. Everyone needs someone, but I learned something. One thing is needing companionship, another is needing permission to exist." We stopped in front of the fountain. The drops fell like a metronome. Men like your husband, she said quietly, believe they own us, but they are only prisoners of their own fear. Fear, yes. Fear of the woman who stops fearing them. On the way back to the house, I paused before a large mirror framed in gold, covered by a white cloth. Why is it covered? I asked. She smiled faintly. Because some things should only be looked at when one is ready. Ready for what? I asked. Ready to see the truth without breaking. Her answer chilled me. I did not insist, but as I climbed the stairs, I felt something unsettling, a mix of fear and curiosity, as though that veiled mirror were waiting specifically for me. That night, as the rain returned with force, I heard a soft sound in the hallway. A whisper. My name, Claudia. I got out of bed, opened the door, and saw the shadow of Doña Emilia walking toward the great room with a lit candle in her hand. I followed her. She stopped in front of the shrouded mirror, brushed her fingers gently over the cloth, and whispered, "Not yet." Then she turned slightly toward me, though she could not see me, and murmured, "Tomorrow you will understand." I returned to my room with my heart pounding wildly. I did not know whether that woman was an angel, a madwoman, or simply someone who had seen too much of life, but something deep inside me, something old and instinctive, told me she had appeared for a reason and that whatever I was about to discover in that house would change everything. I could not sleep. The rain tapped against the windows in an uneven rhythm, as though someone were knocking softly, waiting for an answer. In the hallway, the tall grandfather clock marked the hours with a deep, solemn echo. And although I tried to ignore it, I could not stop thinking about that mirror in the parlor, hidden under its white veil as if it possessed a pulse of its own. From my bed, I could see the flicker of firelight dancing beneath the door. I rose, the wooden floor creaking beneath my bare feet, and descended the stairs slowly without turning on a light, guided only by the faint glow from the hearth. The silence was so thick I could hear the beat of my own heart. The parlor was unchanged, only darker. The white cloth still covered the mirror, but something about it seemed to move ever so slightly, as if breathing. I froze. Logic urged me to return upstairs, but something deeper, a blend of dread and curiosity, pulled me toward it. I touched the cloth. It was cold, almost damp. For a moment, I felt a faint vibration behind it, like a heartbeat trapped in the glass. Then I heard my name, whispered so quietly it could have been imagined. Claudia. I stepped back in terror. There was no mistake. The voice had been mine, but younger, softer, gentler, a version of myself that barely existed anymore. My hands trembled as I stared at the veil. Without thinking, I pulled it off. The mirror reflected the room and something more. What stared back was not my own reflection, but a blurred, aged image of a modest dining room, a table with wilted flowers in the center. And there I was, 30 years younger, serving dinner to Archero. I could hear his cutting voice, sharp and exact. "Soup again, aren't you tired of being useless?" My hand flew to my mouth. It was a memory, one I had buried, and the mirror was giving it back to me. Archero stood, threw the plate to the floor, and my younger self knelt to gather the pieces without a word, tears slipping down her cheeks. Watching myself from outside, helpless, was like witnessing my own ghost. Then behind me, the voice of Doña Emilia sliced through the silence. "I warned you not to uncover it." I turned. She stood there without her cane, without fear, her silver hair loose like a storm cloud. "What is this?" I breathed. "The truth," she answered calmly. "The mirror does not show who we are but what we have refused to see." I moved closer, shaking. "Why show me that?" "Because you are still clinging to a past that shattered you," she said, "and as long as you cling to it, you will remain its prisoner." "And you," I asked, "did you use it too?" She smiled with a sorrow that chilled me long ago, and what I saw cured my fear but stole my sleep. Her tone froze my blood. She approached the mirror, placed her hand delicately against the glass, and said, "Look again." I obeyed. This time the reflection shifted. It was no longer my home but hers. I saw a younger Emilia crying in the same parlor while a man towered over her, spewing insults. His face blurred like smoke, but his voice carried the same contempt as Archero's. "You are worthless, Emilia. You do not even know how to love." She collapsed alone, newly blind, drowning in grief. And in that moment I understood. This was no ordinary mirror. It was a witness, a bridge between two lives burdened by the same wounds. "Why show me this?" I whispered through my tears. "Because you and I," she said, "are the same story told twice. You came to finish a cycle I could not." Her words stole my breath. The mirror glowed brighter. On its surface, images of women began to appear. A young mother holding a baby, another with a bruised eye, another staring at the floor while a man screamed at her. and among them was a woman who caught my attention. Her hair was tied back, her dress blue, her features eerily like mine, but she was not me. Who is she? I asked. Your mother, Emilia whispered, and also mine. I turned to her confused. What are you saying? That blood and destiny have memory, she said softly, and sometimes pain is inherited just like eyes or a voice. I stepped back from the mirror in fear. The reflection returned to my face, but something in me had changed. There was a new expression, a strange mixture of strength and fear, clarity and vertigo. The old woman approached me and took my hand gently. You have seen what you needed to see. Now comes the hardest part, learning not to repeat it. The fire cracked in the hearth. Gustavo appeared in the doorway, startled to find us awake. Is everything all right, Senora Emilia? She nodded calmly. Yes, Gustavo, everything is where it should be. But when she turned her face toward me, her expression shifted. Claudia, she said softly. This house did not find you by accident, she said. The mirror brought you, and the mirror brought you to me. I did not sleep at all that night. The echo of the images lingered in my mind like a melody that refuses to fade. I thought of my mother, of her perpetual silence, of how she lowered her head before my father the same way I lowered mine before Archero. And I understood with a new and bitter clarity that humiliation in my family had never been an incident but an inheritance. Yet I also understood something else, something that rose quietly inside me like the first breath after drowning. That inheritance could be broken. And if Doña Emilia spoke the truth, destiny had offered me a chance, the chance to end the suffering the women in my bloodline had carried for generations. I looked out the window. Dawn was rising behind the trees, the mirror downstairs remained covered. And although my hands shook softly, I smiled because for the first time in years I did not feel like a victim. I felt like a witness to my own awakening. Morning came with a silence unlike any I had known, not the silence of fear, but the silence a soul makes when it can no longer keep running. I descended to the dining room with swollen eyes from a sleepless night. Doña Emilia was sitting by the window drinking coffee, and without turning toward me, she asked what I had seen. Everything, I answered. She nodded slowly, saying, Then you are no longer the same. I sat in front of her, struggling to find words for the fear, the shame, and the strange relief I had felt before that mirror. It was as if I had finally looked at my life with no lies left to hide behind. For a moment I thought she would comfort me, but she did not. Her voice was firm, nearly severe. Seeing the past is useless if you do nothing with it. I told her I did not know what to do. Of course you do, she replied. You are simply afraid to admit it. Admit what I asked. She set down her cup and folded her hands. Admit that you deserve more, that your life still belongs to you. Her words pierced through me. At 68, I could not remember the last time anyone had said something so simple and so radical. Archero had spent years convincing me that my worth existed only in his approval, but this blind woman spoke to me as though she had known my soul all her life. After breakfast, we walked into the garden where sunlight filtered through the branches and the air smelled of magnolia. She walked slowly with her cane, yet somehow it felt as though she were leading me rather than the other way around. I had an Archero too, she said suddenly, and I froze. A man who mistook my love for his property. His name was Ernesto Rivas. He was my husband, he was my executioner, and he is the reason I refused to die as a victim. She sat on a stone bench, her thin, pale hands resting on her cane, her voice lowering as she told me that, when she lost her sight, she believed her life had ended. Did he blind you? I whispered, horrified. An accident, she said bitterly, or that is what they told me, but a woman always knows when something is not coincidence. She paused and the air around us grew still. Her tragedy was an echo of mine, only sharper, more permanent. And what did you do? I asked. I survived, she replied with a faint smile. I stood again. I learned to walk without sight, to hear people's lies by listening to their voices. And one day, when no one expected anything from me anymore, I built all of this with my own hands, and with the money he believed I would never be able to manage alone. I stared at her in awe. This blind woman had carved an entire life from her ruins, and in that instant I understood why she had taken me in at that bus stop. Because she saw in me the woman she had been before she was reborn. Our meeting had never been chance. Destiny does not cross paths out of whim, she said, as though reading my thoughts. Is that why you knew my name? I asked. She nodded. Yes, and because I had seen you before. How? I breathed. Years ago, before I lost my sight, I was a friend of your mother. I froze. My mother. Yes. She used to come to this house when you were a child. I remember her as a gentle but sad woman. Your father dimmed her a little more each day. She never spoke openly about it, but her eyes did. I pressed a hand to my chest as a tear fell without my permission. I remembered the nights when my mother whispered, "Do not argue with your father, child. He is just having a bad day," and that bad day lasted his entire life. Without realizing it, I had repeated her story. Emilia continued. When your mother died, I learned you were alive, married, far away, but I never sought you until a few weeks ago when I dreamed of her. My mother, I whispered. Yes, she asked me to find you. She said you were in danger, and you needed to remember who you were before it was too late. Her voice trembled, and for a moment the powerful woman I knew dissolved into a fragile human shadow. That is why I went to that bus stop, she said. Because I knew destiny would lead you there. I could not speak. Emotion closed my throat. My mother, the dreams, the mirror, the impossible coincidence, all of it fit together like a puzzle I had never dared to assemble. We spent the rest of the afternoon in the garden as she taught me to listen to the world, to discern the whisper of leaves, the rhythm of water, the song of birds. When you cannot see, you learn to hear the soul of things, she said, and when your heart has been broken, you learn to hear the soul of people. Her words struck me deeply. I asked whether she had ever forgiven her husband. She laughed softly. Forgiveness is a great word, she said. Let us say he no longer owns me, not even through hatred. Is he still alive? I asked. No, she replied. But even if he were, he would no longer matter to me. She rose slowly. Now you must decide whether you will continue being the victim of a man or whether you will learn to craft your own salvation. That night, as I prepared for bed, I found a folded note on my pillow in Amelia's handwriting. When the moment comes, open the desk's box. Inside, you will find something that belongs to both of us, but not before. First, you must remember what it feels like to be free. I held the note to my chest, sensing without understanding that the box held the heart of everything. And for the first time in many years, instead of fear, I felt curiosity for the future. I glanced toward the window where the distant mirror glimmered faintly under the moonlight, and I knew that although my path had only begun, I was no longer the woman Archero abandoned at that bus stop. Some wounds do not close with time but with understanding, and that was what Emilia taught me in the weeks that followed, to understand pain not as an enemy but as a teacher. I woke early, long before sunrise, and always found her already awake, seated at the window listening to the first sounds of the morning. She did not need to see the dawn to feel it. Every day begins the same, she would say. But how you live it, she added softly, depends on what you choose to leave behind. The first days were difficult. I had spent a lifetime obeying instead of choosing, swallowing words instead of speaking them, serving instead of being. And yet Emilia, with her firm voice and endless patience, taught me how to unlearn. One afternoon, while we drank tea in the garden, she asked me to do something that froze my breath. Write a letter to Archero, she said. A letter, yes, but not to send. Write it to release everything you never dared say. I spent hours staring at a blank page. No words came until I remembered his shouting, his dismissals, his cold silences, and then suddenly the pen began to move as if it had been waiting all my life. Archero, I wrote, you made me small because you knew that if I ever lifted my head, you would no longer be grand. You silenced me, and for years you succeeded, but even silence grows tired. And today, from this silence that no longer hurts, I forgive you, not for your sake, but for mine, because I refuse to let your shadow live inside me any longer. When I finished, I felt something strange, a lightness, as though writing had returned to me the air he spent decades stealing. That night, Emilia gave me a small wooden box. Do not open it yet, she warned. Everything has its hour. What is inside? I asked. A response, but not for today. I did not insist. I had learned that in this house answers came when one was ready, not when one demanded them. As the days passed, she taught me things that seemed simple but hid the deepest lessons. Walking with your eyes closed, she said, is not very different from living for others. How can I do that? I asked. Listen, she answered, the soul knows more of the road than the sight. And so, with a band over my eyes, I learned to follow sounds, intuition, trust. It was terrifying and liberating at the same time. Each step became a victory, a reminder that I could still move forward without anyone pushing or stopping me. One afternoon, as I walked blind, I stumbled and fell. The impact was sharp. Emilia approached without rushing and asked if it hurt. Yes, I whispered. Good, she said. Pain does not always come to punish you, Claudia. Sometimes it comes to remind you that you are still alive. Her words made me cry, not from sadness, but from recognition. For the first time, I understood that the suffering I had carried for so many years was not just a scar, but proof of my endurance. Then she asked me to do something. Before continuing, she said, "Tell me what you would do in my place." Her smile deepened. "What comes next will chill your skin." A gray afternoon arrived, soft rain tapping against the tall windows, and Emilia sat with me by the fire. Her face looked more tired than usual. "Claudia," she said gently, "I must tell you something. I do not have much time left." A knot formed in my throat. "Do not say that. Do not fear," she interrupted. "We all have an hour to depart, and mine approaches. But before I go, I must be sure you learn the most important thing. Freedom is not begged for, it is taken." She leaned toward me and held my hands with surprising strength. "Promise me something. Whatever happens when that man returns, and he will, I assure you, do not receive him from resentment but from your newfound strength. And if he asks for forgiveness, do not reject it, but never confuse forgiveness with reconciliation. Forgiveness heals, but dignity is never up for negotiation." I cried not from fear, but because I understood I was witnessing a farewell. Emilia did not speak like someone frightened of death, but like someone who had already made peace with life. That night, as we parted, she caressed my cheek and said, "You are stronger than you think, Claudia. The only thing you still lack is to look at yourself without pity." "I do not know if I can," I whispered. "Yes, you can," she said, "because the mirror does not only show wounds, it also reveals the woman who rises from them." She turned to leave, but before climbing the stairs, she paused and added, "When everything feels dark, do not run. Darkness is sometimes only the prelude to light." That night, I dreamed of my mother. She stood in the garden under the rain wearing the same blue dress from the mirror. She smiled at me, and behind her, in the mist, I saw Emilia, young, with open eyes, looking directly into mine. They both extended their hands toward me, and I heard a voice, whether theirs or my own I will never know, whisper, "You are ready." I woke with tears in my eyes but felt no sorrow, only the strange and steady certainty that something inside me had awakened. Life does not always warn you when it intends to place your ghosts before you. Sometimes it simply sets them on your doorstep and seems to say, "Here they are. Now show me if you truly changed." It was a cold morning when I saw him again. Almost 3 months had passed since Emilia had taken me in. I was no longer the woman abandoned at a bus stop. My hair was tied with dignity, my reflection showed a gaze I had never known, and my peace depended on no one. Gustavo was sweeping the entrance when he called out that someone was asking for me. "Who?" I asked. "He says he is your husband." The world held its breath. My chest constricted, my heart pounded against my ribs, but when I spoke, my voice was calm. "Tell him to come in." Archero stepped into the garden wearing the same elegant clothes as always, but without the same aura. His once arrogant posture had collapsed, and the face that used to glow with pride now looked tired, worn, older. He had lost weight. He had dark circles beneath his eyes and an unshaven face. For a moment I struggled to recognize in that man the one I once believed I loved. "Claudia," he whispered with a trembling voice, "I had to see you." I did not respond, I only looked at him. That silence, the same silence he had forced on me for years, was finally mine, and for the first time I wielded it as a weapon. "I need to talk to you," he continued. "I know I do not deserve your time, but everything has collapsed." "What has collapsed?" I asked calmly. "The company, the bank account." He paused and lowered his gaze. "The woman I was with left me." I felt a small sting of irony but said nothing. He raised his head and looked at me directly. "You do not know what I have gone through. I lost everything, Claudia. Everything?" I inhaled slowly. "What you lost was what you never valued, because what is real is not lost, it is cared for." His expression shifted, and for a moment he seemed about to cry. "I only wanted to ask your forgiveness," he murmured. For years I had imagined this moment. I had dreamed of screaming at him, demanding explanations, humiliating him as he humiliated me. But now that he stood before me broken, I realized I no longer needed any of that. Revenge no longer held meaning. Forgiveness was not for him, it was for me. "You do not have to ask my forgiveness," I said at last. He looked confused. "No, because you owe me nothing now. What you did hurt me, yes, but it also forced me to find myself." Doña Emilia appeared in the doorway, leaning on her cane, her presence filling the air with a silent authority. Archero turned toward her instinctively, as if sensing that this woman saw more than she showed. You must be the lady of the house, he said stiffly. I am the one who showed your wife she does not need permission to breathe, she replied with a serene smile. He frowned, uncomfortable. I never meant to hurt her. Of course you did, she answered without raising her voice. But do not worry. The punishment of men who wound others rarely comes from outside. It comes the day they look in the mirror and no longer recognize themselves. Archero fell silent. I watched him, and for the first time felt compassion. Not love or hate, compassion. The kind one feels for someone who destroyed themselves without realizing it. Claudia, he whispered, I have nowhere to stay. I only need a few days. Emilia turned her face toward me. Her expression was calm, but her words were a warning. Decide for yourself, Claudia. The test is not how you faced him before, but what you do now that he has returned. I looked into his eyes and saw the same old gesture of superiority hiding behind the mask of remorse. And in that instant, I knew he had not changed. He was simply afraid. I cannot offer you what you are looking for, I said. Not even a roof, he whispered. You already have the sky, I replied calmly. If you truly want to start again, begin by looking toward it. He lowered his head. For a moment I thought he might kneel, but he did not. He only murmured I'm sorry and walked away. His shadow dissolved as he crossed the gate. When he was gone my legs trembled, not from fear but from relief. Emilia approached and took my hand. I am proud of you, she whispered. It was not easy, I said. Nothing worthwhile ever is. I sat beside her. Her breathing was slower than usual, her hands cold. Emilia, are you all right? I am tired, dear, she said with a gentle smile. But do not worry. Do not tell me to stay, she whispered, interrupting me softly. Do not fear. Death does not frighten those who have already fulfilled their purpose. She leaned toward me. Promise me you will open the box. I will, I said. And promise you will live as the woman you are now. Never lower your head again, not even for love. Her fingers pressed mine with surprising strength. Then she inhaled deeply and whispered, I can see again, but not with my eyes. She died that same night in silence, seated in her favorite chair, a small smile on her lips as if she had finally found rest. Gustavo found her at dawn with the wooden box resting on her lap and a card with my name written on it. For Claudia. This is not the end, it is the beginning. I knelt beside her and cried as I had not done in years, not from sorrow, but from gratitude, because she had given me back the most precious thing a woman can reclaim, her own voice. I looked toward the parlor mirror. For a moment I thought I saw two silhouettes reflected there, mine, and behind me, Doña Emilia smiling, and I knew she had not left completely. She had merely changed form. The dawn after her death was unlike any other. The air inside the house was heavier, as if the walls themselves understood her absence. There were no cries, no voices, no footsteps, only the ticking of the hall clock marking the life that persisted stubbornly, even as the heart struggled to accept it. I sat before the unlit fireplace. The box with my name lay on my knees. It was dark, polished wood with a faint scent of cedar and jasmine, like everything that belonged to her. Beside it was the card written in her trembling hand, for Claudia. This is not the end, it is the beginning. I held it for long minutes before opening the box. I was afraid. Afraid of what it might contain, afraid that discovering her last secret would make her departure real, but more afraid of remaining the same woman if I did not open it. I took a deep breath and lifted the lid. Inside was a sealed folder, a yellow envelope, and a small golden key, nothing more. The envelope bore the words read this first. I opened it. Her voice seemed alive between the lines as my eyes traced each word. Dear Claudia, if you are reading this, it is because I have already left this house. Do not cry for me. My departure is not sorrow, it is fulfillment. You promised you would open the box when you were ready, and that means you have already learned the most important thing, the value of your own gaze. In the folder, you will find my will, the house, the accounts, the properties, everything is in your name. Do not be surprised. I do not do this out of pity. I do it because it belongs to you. But there is something else you must know, something I kept for years and that only you can understand. The key opens the chest in the basement, behind the mirror. There you will find the pieces of the past that bind us. If you choose to open it, be prepared to face the truth without fear. Do not forget, Claudia, the greatest inheritance is not money but the freedom to choose. With love, Emilia, my hands trembled. I read the letter twice, then 3 times. I did not know whether to feel relief or vertigo. The mirror. Again the mirror. Gustavo entered then, his red-rimmed eyes revealing the weight of a night spent holding back tears. I'm so sorry, Senora, he said with a strained voice. She asked me not to inform anyone else. She wanted everything to be peaceful. I nodded. I know. That was her, firm until the end. He placed a white envelope on the table. The notary will come tomorrow, but he asked me to give you this today. What is it? Another letter from Doña Emilia, also for you. The envelope was sealed with wax. I opened it. Inside was a short note written in the same elegant script. Gustavo knows more than he appears to. Trust him. Not everything you see here was mine. Part of this story also belongs to him. I looked at him, confused. He lowered his gaze nervously. She made me promise I wouldn't speak until you read that letter, he murmured. I've read it. Then I must tell you the truth. We descended together into the basement. It was a place I had never seen before. Wide, lined with shelves of boxes, paintings covered with cloths, antique furniture. In one corner, behind the mirror that had been moved down there the night before, stood a small chest. I used the golden key. The click of the lock sounded like a heartbeat. Inside were documents, black and white photographs, and a leather-bound notebook. I opened it. On the first page, a date, 1954, and a sentence written in blue ink, for my sister Anna. If you ever read this, forgive me for not returning. Anna. My mother, the ground seemed to tilt beneath me. Emilia was my mother's sister, I asked, barely able to breathe. Gustavo nodded. Yes. Why did I never know? Because her family erased her. He paused. Your father did not approve of the man she married. She was disowned. She left without looking back. I leaned on the chest to keep from collapsing. My mother never spoke of a sister, never. And yet here she was, her handwriting, her thoughts, her story hidden in the dust of time. I turned the pages. It was a diary. It told of her youth, her love for Ernesto, the violence, the accident that left her blind, the rebuilding of her life. But there was something more. In several entries, she wrote about my mother, about me, about secret visits. Today I went to see her. My little Claudia is already walking. I cannot stay. Anna cannot risk her husband discovering I come, but every time I hold her, I feel destiny pulling us together again. If she ever reads this, she will know I never abandoned her. Tears blurred my vision. I pressed the diary to my chest. My God, I whispered. I thought I'd been alone my whole life, and she had been searching for me. Gustavo placed a hand on my shoulder. She wanted to tell you herself, but she feared time would fail her. And you, I served her for more than 40 years. I witnessed her sorrow and her hope. She believed every woman was born with a mission. Hers was to prepare you to continue what she began. I did not sleep that night. I read every page as if her soul spoke to me from the paper. She wrote how, after the accident, she began taking in abused women, abandoned women, lost women like her. She gave them shelter, work, and a second chance. She called that place the House of Dawn. For years it operated in secret until a betrayal forced her to close it. I swore that when I died, someone would reopen it. Perhaps my sister, perhaps her daughter. I closed the diary with trembling hands. There was no doubt anymore. This inheritance was not an act of generosity, it was a calling. The next morning, the notary arrived right on time. A man in a gray suit, with a kind face and a steady voice that sounded accustomed to delivering news that shakes the soul. We sat in the study. The document on the table contained several pages stamped and signed. Mrs. Rivas left everything in your name, Doña Claudia, the notary said. Everything. The house, the accounts, the deed to the land on which this property stands, and a trust intended for the creation of a foundation. A foundation. Yes, it is spelled out clearly in her will. He opened a folder and read aloud. I want my niece, Claudia Galvez, to create a shelter for homeless women, single mothers, or victims of abuse. That will be my legacy. I want it to be named after my first home, the House of Dawn. I couldn't hold back the tears. Each word was a confirmation that fate had not been mistaken. Everything I had lived, humiliation, abandonment, loneliness, had prepared me for this. Gustavo stepped forward and handed me a handkerchief. She knew you would accept, he said. And if I do, I whispered through sobs, then the money will be transferred to an anonymous association. But he paused. But you won't refuse. You already know what your mission is. Days passed and the house began to change. I opened the windows and let the light in. The echo of Emilia's laughter seemed to float down the halls. In the garden, the flowers she tended with such care bloomed again. Gustavo helped me organize papers, donations, permits. Little by little, the House of Dawn began to awaken. The first to arrive were three women: a young mother with a baby, an older woman fleeing a violent husband, and a girl without a family who had been sleeping on the streets. When they crossed the doorway, I felt something impossible to explain, as if Amelia herself were standing there, watching, smiling. Every night, once the lights were off, I sat before the mirror. I no longer feared it. I looked at it with respect, with gratitude, and each time I did, I seemed to see something different. Not just my reflection, but also flashes of the past. Fragments of all the women who had once been wounded and who now found comfort within these walls. A month later, as I was going through the trust documents, I discovered a letter I had not seen before. It was hidden among the notarial papers. I opened it. It was from Amelia, written shortly before she died. Dear Claudia, if you are reading this, it means you have taken the step. I am glad to know the mirror did not frighten you, that the pain did not break you. Sometimes the women in our family are born with the curse of silence. Your mother broke it halfway, I broke it with screams, but you broke it with dignity. Thank you for not letting my story die with me. If you ever doubt, look into the mirror again, but this time you will not see the past. You will see the strength of all who came before you. I leave you my house, my name, and my faith. Do something worthy with them. With eternal love, Emilia. I cried in silence, not from sadness but gratitude, because I understood then that she had left me more than belongings. She had left me a mission, one of love and justice. That night, as the last light of the day disappeared, I went to the living room. I lit a candle before the mirror and looked directly into it. The reflection that stared back at me made my breath tremble. I stood there with my hair loose, my eyes calm, my face at peace. And behind me, the faint silhouette of a woman with a cane was smiling. Thank you, Aunt, I whispered, and as if the wind answered, the flame flickered gently. In that moment, I understood something I had never been able to grasp before: that love does not die with the body, that blood does not fade with time, and that some bonds are never cut, only transformed. A few weeks later, we officially inaugurated the House of Dawn. Neighbors came, volunteers, women of all ages. The garden was full of life. Laughter replaced silence. On one of the walls, I had a bronze plaque installed with an inscription that read, "For all those who believed they could not begin again." When I cut the ribbon, I felt something inside me close and something much bigger open. It wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of all the others. I looked at the sky. Sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a beam of light directly onto the garden fountain. There, where Amelia used to sit and listen to the water, I could swear I heard her voice. You did well, Claudia. Now let others learn to see themselves. I smiled and knew I had kept my promise. Because I was no longer the woman abandoned at a bus stop, nor the submissive wife, nor the daughter of silence. I was the heir to all the women who learned to survive. And in the mirror's reflection, one last time, I saw something that made me close my eyes with tenderness. Me, standing tall, surrounded by women, and behind us the luminous figure of Dona Emilia, guiding us all toward the light of dawn. They say destiny is written through the decisions one makes, but I believe it is also written through the wounds one refuses to hide. 6 months have passed since we opened the House of Dawn, and every morning I still wake up with the sensation that Emilia walks beside me. Her cane no longer echoes through the hallways, but her voice lives on in every woman who crosses our door, seeking refuge, comfort, or simply a place to believe in herself again. Every day new stories arrive, some heartbreaking, some hopeful, but all share something in common. Behind fear beats an immense force that only needs a little love to awaken. And when I look at them, when I see those women laugh again, I feel Emilia's soul smiling with me. The first winter was hard. We didn't have enough money to keep the shelter running. Some nights I feared losing everything, but then I remembered her words. Freedom is not begged for, it is taken. So I went out, spoke to neighbors, to organizations, to women who had once stayed here and now wanted to help. And slowly, the miracle repeated itself. An anonymous donation here, a fundraiser there. When your purpose is clean, life conspires in your favor. Sometimes I sit in the same armchair where Amelia used to nap. I close my eyes and listen to the sounds of the house: laughter, footsteps, a guitar, a baby crying. It is no longer a refuge of silence, but a home full of life. One afternoon, while reviewing papers in the study, Gustavo came in with an envelope. "This arrived for you," he said with a smile. The sender was the municipal office. I opened it. Inside was an official document. The House of Dawn had been recognized as an institution of public benefit. For the first time, the state acknowledged the work Emilia had carried out in silence for decades. A lump tightened in my throat. I placed the document on the desk beside a framed photograph of her. "We did it, Aunt," I whispered. And I swear that at that moment, the desk lamp flickered softly, as if answering. That night, the sky was covered in stars. I went out to the garden. The magnolia flowers had opened again, and the air smelled of hope. I walked to the fountain where Amelia once sat with her cane, resting across her lap. The water's reflection showed the moon split in two, like an ancient mirror. I leaned closer and saw my face. For the first time in a long time, it didn't frighten me. I was no longer the woman Archero left at that bus stop, nor the humiliated wife, nor the daughter of silence. I was a woman who had survived oblivion, who had turned her pain into something others could touch, breathe, inhabit. And that, I realized, was the true victory. One morning, I received an unexpected letter. It came from a hospital. Archero said he was sick, alone, and needed to see me. I froze. For minutes, I didn't know what to do. Then I remembered the promise I made to Amelia, not to live from resentment. I went. When I arrived at his room, I didn't recognize him at first. He was gaunt, his eyes sunken, his hair gray. When he saw me, he broke into tears. I didn't come to talk about the past, I said softly. I came to tell you that I forgive you. He lowered his head. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not, I said, but you need it more than I do. I stayed a few minutes in silence. Then I stood and said goodbye, no more words. When I stepped outside the hospital, the sun touched my face, and I felt something inside me close. Forgiveness is not always reconciliation. Sometimes it is simply the most elegant way of saying, you no longer have power over me. I returned home with a light heart. That afternoon, when I arrived, the women were gathered in the garden preparing a community meal, children running, laughter, music. It was the most beautiful sound in the world. Doña Claudia, one of them shouted, "Come, we want a picture." We gathered around the fountain. Someone brought a camera, and just before the flash went off, a white butterfly landed on my shoulder. Everyone fell silent, and I smiled. It was her, Emilia, reminding me she was still here, in every new life blooming within these walls. That night, I wrote a letter to myself. I placed it inside the same chest where I had found Emilia's diary. It read, Claudia, if you ever feel afraid again, remember everything you have done. Remember the hands you helped, the hugs you gave, the tears you dried. Destiny has memory, and when one woman heals, the story of those before her heals too. May this house never know silence again. With love, yourself. I folded it, stored it, and closed the chest. For the first time in my life, I was not afraid of the future. Today, as I tell you this, the sun shines through the study window and caresses the portraits hanging on the wall. My mother, Emilia, and me. 3 generations of women who, in different ways, learned to survive. Sometimes I think pain travels in the blood, but so does strength. And our mission on this earth is not to erase our scars, but to turn them into markers for those who come after us. Destiny has memory. Yes. And when one woman rises, all the women who came before rise with her. That's why, when you look at me or hear my voice, you are not listening only to my story, you are listening to the story of all of us. Before I end, I want to tell you something. If you were ever made to feel small, if someone made you believe your voice had no worth or that your age stole your power, look in the mirror. That is your answer. You are still alive, and as long as you breathe, you have the right and the obligation to begin again. It doesn't matter who left you behind, who hurt you, or who failed to believe in you. There is always a after waiting for you, a dawn ready to start with you. And if today you need a sign, let this be yours. Start again, not to forget, but to honor everything you survived. Because destiny, when it sees a woman choose herself, applauds her in silence. I am Claudia Galvez, and this was my story. And if it moved you, I have a very special invitation. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and tell me in the comments from which city you're watching. Your support keeps alive the voices of all the women who were once silenced, and who now, finally, are being heard.